Alright, got a little classical music in the background here to help your brains work better, hopefully. I'm going to give you an overview of the things that you need to know about plants that we're not going to cover in class, or things that I think you might need a better review on. This is the side, cross-section view of a leaf. These are the different parts that you need to know. So first of all, if we look at the leaf itself all together, the big part of the leaf is the blade, and what you might call the stem of the leaf is actually called the petiole. And then this big part here of the diagram is a zoomed in cross section of what a leaf looks like if you cut it in half. So let's take a look at that in a little bit greater detail. There's a waxy outer layer called the cuticle that prevents the leaf from drying out. And then there's a layer of cells at the top and the bottom called epidermis. And those are just the outer protective layers. Now, within the epidermis, and you can see there's cuticle on the bottom also, within the epidermis on the lower side, on the underside of the leaf, there are little openings called stoma. The plural is stomata, and these are what let carbon dioxide in so that the leaf can do photosynthesis, and it lets carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. Whether or not these stoma are open are controlled by these cells that surround the stoma, called guard cells. Literally, they stand guard. Let's see. You have two layers of cells, two types of layers of cells within the leaf. You have the palisade mesophyll cell. That's these guys right here. It almost looks like columns, like Greek columns, one stacked right next to the other. That's what a palisade is. It's a walkway that's lined with columns. And then below that is called the spongy mesophyll. And you can see that there are air spaces there where, again, the carbon dioxide is let in and the oxygen is removed. Now, the other thing we need for photosynthesis is water. And the water comes up through the roots and the vascular bundle here, which is what we would see on a leaf and call it a vein. The vascular bundle is how water gets in. So what you see here, the blue right there, is where the water comes up from the roots. And then the pink is how the nutrients that are produced through the process of photosynthesis, how those get down to the rest of the plant. So remember that glucose is produced through the process of photosynthesis. So that's the leaf. Now, speaking of the leaf, there's a process called transpiration. Know this vocabulary term here. Know this vocabulary term. What it means is the evaporation of water through the stomata. So the water escapes through those openings, through those stoma that are on the underside of the leaves. Transpiration, actually, you think, okay, plant losing water, that's a bad thing. But it actually serves a purpose. It helps pull the water up through the roots and the stems. So we said that vascular tissue is how water gets up from the roots. Transpiration is actually, it's almost like when you pull liquid up through a straw, there has to be something coming out of the straw at the top end in order for the rest of the liquid to move through. So that process is transpiration. How does a plant grow? There's two different ways that plants grow. They can grow taller and they can grow wider. So two different processes going on here, two different structures of the plant. Taller is accomplished by a structure called the apical meristem. So an apex is where the word apical comes from. An apex is the top of something. So a plant grows taller because of the apical meristem. The very tops of the plant, there's cells dividing and adding on. The width of a plant is due to cell size increase, and in that case there are two different areas where this happens. The vascular cambium and the xylem and phloem in plants with wood, bark. These are the annual rings. If you've ever seen a tree stump and you go, okay, how old is this plant, or how old is this tree, or when it was cut down, you count those annual rings, and xylem and phloem, that vascular tissue that gets tacked on every year. Xylem brings water up from the roots. Phloem takes the glucose, or the food, down from the leaves to the rest of the plant. So cell size increase of the vascular cambium of xylem and phloem, which is the annual rings, make a plant grow wider. Monocots versus dicots is important to know. You'll see this in your study guide if you haven't seen it yet. Your homework, monocots, and I got a slide, the next slide will kind of give you a side-by-side comparison. Monocots, the example is corn. Dicots, maple trees or lima beans. If you think of the different monocots, there's one seed. If you think of the seed like a corn seed, it doesn't split in half. It is what it is. And then if you've ever messed with those helicopters that come off of maple trees, if you take the seed out, it splits into two. If you've done that with lima beans, you take that outer seed covering off, and it splits into two. This is a great side-by-side comparison here. You have, like I was just saying, the seed halves, and that's really what it's named for, is these seed halves. Monocot, prefix meaning one. There's one seed part in a monocot. And a eudicot, or a dicot, has two seed halves. In the roots, monocots have the xylem and phloem in a ring. You can see it right here. And then in eudicots, the phloem is between the arms of the xylem, so it's almost like a star shape or spokes of a wheel. Monocots in the stems look a little bit less organized. Things are kind of scattered. In eudicots or dicots, the vascular bundles are in a ring. In leaves, monocots have parallel veins, like a blade of grass or a corn leaf, if you've ever seen that. I believe banana leaves have parallel veins also. And then in eudicots, there's like a net pattern in the leaf veins. They branch out. With flowers, there's another difference between monocots and dicots. In monocots, the flower parts are in threes, or multiples of three. In eudicots, the flower parts are in fours or fives, and they're multiples. Finally, different kinds of things, different kinds of plants. Gymnosperm is a cone-bearing plant. There's no fruit that's produced. An angiosperm is a flower-bearing plant, so we have fruits that are produced there. So gymnosperm would be like a pine tree. Angiosperm would be like a pear tree. Let's take a look at the flowers then. Different parts of the flower. Let's start at the bottom. Here's the stem down here at the bottom, and the leaves that enclose that flower bud are called the sepal, and they end up kind of down at the bottom. Then we have the ovary, is this whole structure right here. The ovary contains ovules, the little egg cells. And then a flower has both boy parts and girl parts. So the ovary is part of the girl parts, and then we have the style and the stigma at the top. The style and the stigma, all these together are the carpel. The way to remember stigma, it's sticky, and it's sticky to help the pollen grains stick to it. The style is like a stalk that leads from the stigma to the ovary. And then we have the boy parts. This is the stamen, the anther, and the filament. The anther is where the pollen grains are produced. The filament is kind of the stalk on top of which the anther rests. And then, of course, we have the petal of the flower that attracts pollinators.